Welcome to the Settlement Strategy Playbook, brought to you by JPAR Real Estate and produced by HousingWire. I'm Tracey Velt, host of the RealTrending podcast, and your guide through this 4-part series on the post-settlement world of real estate. Each week this month, we'll explore and discuss fiduciary responsibilities, the intent behind the settlement, and the DOJ's involvement, building an effective buyer consultation, and crafting a seller consultation as well. Today, I'm speaking with Jessica Conrad. She is a realtor and a GRI with JPAR San Antonio, and we talk all about having that seller conversation. What are some ways that you can broach the subject? How much information do you have to give them about the settlement? And what are some ways to kind of smooth over the process and let them know in no uncertain terms that commissions are negotiable, their compensation is negotiable, and it is a blank spot on the contract that they are welcome to fill in. So it was a really interesting conversation. She had some really great tips for working with other realtors and also working with her sellers. So enjoy the podcast. Hi, Jessica. Welcome to the RealTrending podcast.
Hi, thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Why don't we go ahead and start? I'll have you kind of introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about your real estate practice.
Sure. My name is Jessica Conrad, and I'm a realtor here in San Antonio. I've been in real estate for 8 years now, and it has completely taken over my life in the best way. I focus typically on properties that are in central San Antonio, lots of existing construction, as well as custom home building. And it's challenging and every day is different, but it's incredibly rewarding. And I'm so happy that I made the transition after my military career.
Well, congratulations, and thank you for your service as well. So,
absolutely.
This whole podcast is about seller expectations, seller presentations, seller conversations post the NAR settlement, the August 17th date. So I know it's been early, but have you noticed any significant changes in seller expectations since, regarding like real estate agent commissions since August 17th?
It's interesting. I've had several listing presentations since the August 17th rules here in San Antonio went into place regarding realtor compensation. And for the most part, it's been a conversation that I've had to initiate. It hasn't been that sellers are particularly asking, hey, how is this affecting the way that we're going to move forward, working together and in this transaction? So it's really been, me leading the conversation. Thankfully, JPAR has prepared us with numerous trainings about the upcoming changes, as well as Texas Realtors during their quarterly meeting went over some new forms as well. And so based on the education that we've received and sort of my own research into the background of the lawsuits and what initiated all of these changes, I've been able to proactively educate my sellers in the way that we're going to move forward so that they're completely aware of what's going on.
Okay, I want to talk about kind of wording and scripting. How are you addressing it with sellers? Do you have a script that you normally use? Can you share that with us or?
Certainly. So I make sure to highlight or thoroughly go over the new MLS rules explanation for sellers acknowledgement form. And when I talk about compensation, and the way I have spoken about compensation historically throughout my practice, is making sure that I let them know and show them that on the listing agreement, the compensation is a fillable space. And so it is negotiable. And I let them know, in case they're talking to other agents, they may hear a certain percentage, but I also make sure to reiterate that it's a fillable space. And so agreeing to what makes them feel comfortable and what we decide as a team to use going forward, I make sure that I word it exactly that way and say that it is a fillable space.
Yeah, it's so important right now. I think, it's funny. My sister-in-law is looking at selling a property, and she's spoken to 3 different realtors, and they've all talked to her in different ways about what is going on, as well as buyer's agents that she's talked to as well. So it is really interesting, kind of how different realtors are approaching it. And there's no right or wrong way, as long as they're being transparent and honest and expressing it. Do you find that you have to talk about at the NAR settlement with them, or do you just, because I don't feel like you really have to go into detail about it, but do you have some sort of wording that you use about it?
Right. So I make sure to, when we get into the conversation of compensation, and they might say, I was reading an article and I'm not sure how this affects me or how this will affect me listing my home for sale. I make sure that, essentially, if they don't necessarily bring it up and say the words lawsuit or settlement, I might not necessarily phrase it that way. I may say, there have been some legal changes that have occurred within our industry, and this is how my brokerage has decided to tackle them. I let them know that one of the main results is that the compensation won't be listed on MLS any longer. And so what that means going forward, we are about 3 weeks in. And so maybe the larger ramifications of that have yet to be seen. However, so far, it's been very straightforward. Everyone's been very receptive, and I simply refer to them as legal changes within our industry that have affected the way that we market realtor compensation, or that we ceased to market properties along with realtor compensation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, have you come across any challenges as far as the conversations that you're having, or people, just saying, oh, I heard I don't have to pay compensation anymore. Like, you do your job for free. Have you run across any challenges like that?
Not yet. Not yet. I think that along with the changes in our listing agreements and when we talk about compensation, the other change is making sure that we are providing value to our clients, and that we are expressing that value, showing them and telling them, hey, this is what I have to offer you. This is what sets me above other industry professionals, and really fortifying those relationships. I get a lot of my practice comes from referrals at this point, and so making sure that that reputation is above board and super solid, so that people know that they're dealing with a professional, then I feel like it's less necessary that I'm having to explain to them that some sort of compensation is in order. When it comes to compensation, it's not even the question. When it comes to the question of compensation, it's not often that it's myself having to necessarily advocate for my own compensation, but more so preparing my sellers for realistic points in the transaction that, listen, here are some options of the ways we can handle these things. This is what I have seen, the sorts of calls that are coming in from buyer's agents wondering if we're offering compensation. And these are the ways that I think we could handle it, and asking for their feedback on what they think they would like to go with.
Yeah, and transparency in the transaction is so important, especially today. It always was important, but I think even more so in these days. And how have you seen sellers pretty receptive to your conversations? I mean, I would assume that they know they have to pay you as a professional, so that would not be a shock to them. But have they been pretty receptive? And how have you handled any type of resistance, or how do you plan to handle any type of resistance?
Right. So I think it's very hard to know what you don't know. So to that point, as long as I educate my sellers about what's going on, and like you said, I mean, honesty is best policy, but I also would add that transparency and honesty are best policy at this point and in the past, and especially moving forward. So I haven't encountered resistance necessarily. Now, depending on a seller's situation, if they're going to be buying a new property and they need to net a certain amount from their property that they're listing for sale, like I said, I always reiterate that it is a fillable space in the contract. And I also try to express the value in having something set aside for the buyer's agent as well, so that they're able to facilitate a buyer coming to the table and not disqualify people because then they have to make up the difference of what the sellers won't contribute.
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult for buyers. A lot of them are scraping to get just a down payment, much less have to pay the compensation as well, although they are not tied to the seller anymore. So the
Right.
buyer and the buyer's agent have to negotiate that between the two of them. What strategies have you adopted to make home sellers feel more comfortable with the compensation agreements? There's more forms to sign, more explanation necessary. Do you have any strategies for making that conversation run a little smoother?
Yes, actually. So I have a seller's information packet that I put together a few years ago, and I've included copies of all of the forms that we use, and especially the new JPAR form that we have explaining the MLS rules. And when I do my listing presentations, I like to call them listing educations because, like I said, an informed seller is going to be more confident, just naturally more confident to say, hey, I had interviews with several realtors maybe, and this woman really told me, Jessica told me so many things. She went over every single form. I highlight things that I think are very pertinent to the discussion, especially with these new rules in place. So my strategy is just always to inform my clients, no matter what. I want them to know what's going on. Like you said, transparency is so important. And have that open dialogue if they want to ask questions, if they're not certain, if they're not understanding certain things. But moving forward, how I plan on facing these challenges is to have faith in what I know. They don't call it continuing education for nothing. JPAR has broker Q&A on Monday. So if I should have questions, Tony's always available for us. He's a great resource, as well as broker support, email, all of those things. But I keep myself educated and updated on the changes and what's going on, and receptive to other agents' strategies on how they're handling their challenges as well. And then based on those things, I can make a very informed decision with confidence. So I just want to continue to inform myself, and that way I can best inform my clients as well.
So agent education and broker support are so important through this process. Tell me a little bit about how JPAR has supported you throughout the process of before the settlement, the August 17th date, and then continuing on.
Yeah. So the great thing about JPAR is through BOSS, we have our different threads that we can have discussions. there's always announcements keeping us, informed about what's going on, letting us know, hey, there's training coming down the pipeline. Hey, take a look at, draft. You can look at the drafts of these forms. So the communication has really been free flowing ever since the first whispers of the settlement and things were coming down, and we weren't sure how it was going to affect the business. So having broker Q&A every Monday, even Tech Tuesdays is really helpful. Being able to talk to other agents in our market and see how they're handling things, what they recommend, what they're doing. It's very open and honest conversation, which I really love. And specifically with the training offered for the new forms coming down and the way that we were going to initiate these changes, there were so many trainings. I think I attended 4 different sessions, 1 in person and 3 on Zoom. And there were people from offices all over that were attending those trainings as well, especially via Zoom. And so hearing their input just gave a wide range, a plethora of solutions for us. And the chats, the chats in the Zoom were really helpful as well. And so it's just been great. I feel like JPAR's done a great job with just the actual support, whether it's informational support or, hey, I have a question about this, even emailing them prior to my first listing presentation before or once the new MLS rules went into place on the 17th, I had a listing presentation on the 23rd. And that was my first one since the new rules went into effect. So just making sure I was dotting my I's and crossing my T's. And they let me know I was going in the right direction. So it was really helpful. One thing I also want to add in about, the way that we market ourselves now post these changes is really highlighting our relationships with other realtors in town, and letting our clients know that we have lots of good relationships with the other professionals in our industry. And so having that effortless communication with them as well makes for oftentimes a little bit of a calmer transaction in addressing some of those changes should the sellers have, should my clients have concerns and questions and things. So, which I also think is important when now that these rules are being passed down, because maybe for some agents it's true, but not for me. I'm not always going to be the listing agent. Sometimes I'm going to be a buyer's agent. And so it's important for me to take that into consideration, that the way you treat one on one side, it might be your turn on the next side. And so, I want to put my sellers first when I'm the listing agent. I want to put my buyers first when I'm the buyer's agent. And ultimately this career is collaborative. It is collaborative to its core. And so you collaborate with your sellers, you collaborate with your buyers, and you collaborate with other agents. And so really marketing yourself in that way of just being a super connector, letting them know your marketing strategy. I really do play up my marketing strategy as far as social media. We have a great stager here in San Antonio that I feel like every agent follows her. So that's a great way to market your property, to get when if your client's asking for staging and things, making sure that all of your whole referral base for the entire transaction process is really on point.
And how do you get across your value? Is there anything that you're doing differently in kind of explaining that? I think in the past, agents have kind of glossed over the value that they offer because they just want to make the transaction seamless. So any problems that happen, they fix them behind the scenes and nobody knows. The seller doesn't know, the buyer doesn't know. How are you addressing your value in your listing presentation now, or in your conversations with sellers?
Yeah, so I always like to give examples of my successes, and along with transparency, I always give an example of a challenge that I had to overcome. So having those examples set of like, hey, sometimes things don't go the way you think they're going to go and there's bumps in the road. But if you're resourceful and you're a creative thinker, like I definitely am a creative thinker. I think outside the box. I think it's from just my military service, which you wouldn't necessarily correlate with creativity, but it really is about problem solving on the fly. And so it's not necessarily that hard for me, but I also like to make it fun. I always play at my open houses because my open houses are always really fun and different. If the space allows for it, I'll have yoga classes in the backyard or really silly games that we play or raffle off silly things and really make it a community event sort of thing. So you get lots of people in the door and then there's excitement and buzz around the property. And so marketing yourself that way of like, hey, listen, it's all, business, but no one said you can't have a little fun. And also, as long as you have those good connections and ties within the community, which I feel like I definitely do because I have a robust life adjacent to real estate. I have a attainable housing podcast that I do here on our local community FM radio station in Powerhouse. I attend city council meetings. I sit on educational boards here in town. I sit on a couple nonprofit boards as well. So making sure that they know, hey, I'm connected. I have this in the bag. If this listing has my name on it, it's going to be in front of a lot of people. And having them feel secure in that. And also that it's a free flow of information. I don't have any secrets. I don't keep any secrets from you. I'm here representing you. My duty is to you. And so I don't like to keep secrets from my clients. I like to let them know what's going on. If it's affecting them, if it's affecting their bottom line, it's not about the transaction itself. It's about your client. So as long as you put them first, you're good. Yeah.
And Jessica, my last question is any best practices that you can suggest for other agents who maybe are struggling with how to talk to sellers, amid the changes?
Attend trainings, attend sessions where they're talking about these new rules. I've attended a few at local title companies that they've offered. Like I said, I went to the Texas Realtors quarterly meeting, and that was all we spoke about. Every panel discussion was about the new rules and the training that JPAR offered. I also practiced filling out the forms. I went on Trek and I printed off a few of their versions, and I went on Dotloop and printed off a couple of our versions, and I just sat and practiced filling them out. I practiced explaining them to prospective clients that were not in the room, and really got comfortable with the material. I read newspaper articles. I read the Washington Post articles about it. I went online and just did a ton of research so that I was confident in the things that I was saying. And I also talked to other agents about it. I wasn't shy. I reached out to agents at other brokerages. Hey, what are they telling you? I reached out to many of my fellow JPAR agents. Hey, how do you guys feel? What are you guys doing to handle this? I go to networking events and talk to the title companies. What's been their experience? Have you seen anything at the closing table that kind of was alarming? And so, yeah, I just feel like collecting that information and collecting knowledge is the only thing that besides putting it into practice, those are the only things that are going to build that confidence in your knowledge and be able to then explain that to your clients.
Yeah, that's so smart. I mean, it is true. The more you practice, the more comfortable you are with what you're saying and the material that you're, giving to them. So, and Jessica, thank you so much for sharing how to do seller conversations amid the settlement changes. We really appreciate having you on RealTrending.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.